Making Big Shifts, presented by Marketing Reboot, with your host, Josh Anderson.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Making Big Shifts by Marketing Reboot. I'm your host, Josh Anderson, where we talk to real entrepreneurs making really big shifts and the real results and stories that follow. Today, I'm excited to have Ali Garbero here. She is a brand messaging specialist and the founder of Right Brand Marketing. So welcome to the podcast, Ali.
Hey, thanks so much, Josh.
Yeah, Jason Vanderveer put us in connection together. I'm so glad he did. Shout out to him as well. You should listen to that podcast if you haven't. But he said you had an amazing story. So let's kind of go into that story and your transition and a little bit of your background.
Absolutely. Well, I know your show is all about making big shifts, and I definitely made some big shifts in my career. I was a 15-year corporate employee and decided to go out and jump into entrepreneurship, right? You realize I want something different. You know, you're told, hey, I don't want these golden handcuffs. I don't want to be tied down by the man. And so we had just purchased our very first house. My realtor made it look way too easy. I thought, gosh, if I could just sell one house a month, okay, I got this. So I get my license, put my 2 weeks notice in, and off I go. So I ran that business for many, many years, grew that into somewhat, I'd say it's pretty successful. And then, oh my gosh, what I learned was I liked it. I enjoyed it. It was definitely very financially rewarding. But then in about 2019, I made another big shift. And that's when I really realized that what I love most about running my real estate business was the marketing side of it. That's when I really pivoted into what I had done many, many years before in corporate as well, was a lot of content writing. I came across Donald Miller, if you're familiar with building a story brand. I became a certified guide, and since 2020, I've been part of that community. And that's really what I do today, is just really help companies clarify their message, really get their content and tie that back to revenue so that they, have a good plan.
Yeah. Well, I'm taking some notes here for future questions. Love it. So early when you started in realty, how did you get your foot in the door essentially? And what kind of marketing tactics were you using to start getting more listings?
That is the golden nugget question that every realtor wants. And this was back in 2013. So the real rough of it is, my realtor made it look real easy, but it was not easy. So I show up to my brokerage day one and I'm like, hey, I'm open for business, right? Everybody's going to come my way. That was absolutely not the case. In fact, many of my friends made me feel like I was inviting them to join my MLM. Like, nobody wants to be the guinea pig to selling their home. So what I had to do initially to really market was a lot of the cold outreach. I was doing a lot of cold calling. I was doing door knocking. I was hosting open houses, and I actually landed my first listing through a door knock. A family just took a chance on me. My script was this: knock, knock. My name's Ali. I'm a local realtor. Just curious if you've ever considered selling your home. And by the grace of God, this little family said, we have. And that was my first listing. Back in the day, I sold that home for $136,000. It's worth probably $500 today.
Yeah. Timing is everything, like we talked about before, but we jumped on here. So that's amazing. So, all right. So you did in realty, and now you decided we're going to pivot again now to marketing, copywriting, things of that nature. What was the first step in that? I mean, you had the history of doing it in corporate. Obviously you did some in realty, but then starting your own business and finding your niche. What I guess finding your niche is the question I want to ask about. How did you go through that process of determining what that was?
That's a really interesting thing to think about. And I'm going to backpedal for just a moment on that question on marketing in real estate. What I learned in real estate was initially you're doing a lot of the cold outreach. Over the years, what I realized was I was not leveraging my sphere of influence. And the biggest really aha for me was I was not tying my marketing efforts to revenue. So for example, if a realtor says, hey, I want to sell 50 homes this year, great. Well, what marketing initiatives are you going to put in place? And a lot of people were doing a lot of that. Paying Zillow, paying for postcards, when in fact the people that are most easiest to win over are the people that know you. So that's when I tied revenue to the marketing initiatives that I was working on. That's when I really went all in on marketing to my sphere of influence. So the marketing activities that I put in place obviously were things like emails, newsletters, client events. So by the time I came over to now starting a new business in marketing, I knew, okay, you're going to have to tie it to revenue. And initially, the niche, believe it or not, Josh, was realtors. I thought, well, I know the real estate business. Let me go market to realtors or to mortgage officers. That was a little bit challenging. I tried that probably for about the first year. And then that's when I finally said, nope, I really want to work more with, either B2B companies where I had that experience of corporate, okay, either tech or cybersecurity. Those individuals that were really had bigger budgets, but that also had systems in place. And so today, really the companies that I enjoy helping with most usually fall within the revenue space of anywhere from 3 to 5 million. So they're not your ginormous brands, but they're also not the kind of just getting started. However, I have had the privilege of working with some bigger brands, much bigger than that. But I found that they're a lot easier to work with, again, because they've got so many of those systems and processes in place.
But they're not big enough where they have all the red tape, all the approval structures. That's just to be daunting as a marketer. I totally understand that. So
Exactly.
yeah. So, all right. So you made this pivot and now you're, this 3 to 5 million AR, our top line group. Right? What are they needing the most? What are their biggest, in terms of copy and things of that nature? Where are they missing the mark and what are they coming to you for exactly?
Well, that was what I loved so much about StoryBrand, because I had spent a lot of time writing blogs. While I was in real estate, I was still doing a lot of marketing, which I was actually on the side working with some other brands as well. And Donald Miller really changed how I see marketing, because what I see is so often we make marketing about us and kind of telling our story. If it was in real estate, you would see a lot of, here's why you should work with me. I've sold 100 homes. I'm awesome. I'm great. If you're and I heard this big tech leader and he was asked what he does. He started talking about hey, we've been in business for 50 years. We've worked with all these clients. What Donald Miller helped me really shift was that really what our customers care about is them. They care about the problems that we help them solve. And so that's been the biggest shift. When people come to me, they're usually thinking, hey, Ali, you know what? I really need a new website. Or, hey, could you write a couple blogs? Or could you write a few emails? But really, the biggest thing is they've done two things. Their brand message is either lost. They're not all kind of rowing in the same direction, repeating those same sound bites. And then number two, they're not sure where customers are coming from, how to repeat and scale that, and what's really converting. So they've got all these marketing activities going on, but they're not sure, well, what's really getting us more revenue and more customers?
Yeah. Oh my. That's what I built my career on, is that helping those exact people as well, right? Marketing systems and clarity are so huge these days. I got introduced to Donald Miller. I think he was Gary Wilbur's, who was on the podcast like 20 or 30 podcasts ago. He introduced me to Donald Miller. He was walking me and a co-founder of a fitness app that we sold later on. But we were walking through the Donald Miller StoryBrand approach to build out the website for this. And you're right. It is very eye-opening to go through that process. And then it becomes like second nature to start using that structure of the prospect's the hero in the journey, right? You're just guiding them throughout the process. So it's super powerful. And I think a lot of time, once you go through it, you just naturally do that in some of your copywriting going forward. Have you found that to be true as well?
Everything that you start to send out, from your website, the way that you're writing, from the social content that you create, from the LinkedIn posts. So, for example, I was working with a really big brand recently, and they just won a major award, which is very noteworthy in their industry. And of course, the route that you want to take is, hey, we're number one in X, Y, and Z, which was a great approach. But when I shared that content, I didn't take it from the approach of we're awesome and we're number one. I said, look, when this target audience, okay, speaking to my target audience, when this target audience needs to drive this decision up the chain, they need to know that they can trust this name, right? This brand. They don't want to take a software solution to a C-suite decision maker that they don't feel comfortable about. So the fact that we are number one in this space is going to make you look really phenomenal when you bring it up the chain, because you can confidently say, yep, they won number one in this area, yada, yada, yada. And so again, just making that pivot from everything that we do should be about what's in it for me. And I think you and I know that as marketers, but boy, even the most phenomenal brands that I work with that have been in business forever, that are making a ton of money, even they still miss that shift.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's almost like it's human nature to want to talk about yourself in a certain aspect, right? And it revolves around brands too. So I get where it's coming from, but it is a massive shift that can completely change the trajectory or where my head goes, conversion rates. It can definitely increase your conversion rates for sure.
Hey, sorry to interrupt the podcast really quick. If you're getting value from making big shifts, please subscribe and tap the bell so you don't miss the next conversation. All right, they appreciate it. And now back to the podcast.
Absolutely. Well, and let me help you kind of speaking on conversion rates, right? When we look at why people buy, there's a lot of psychology to that, and if you think back, I use this story over and over and over again. And if you remember back in the day, Tony Horton had a program called Beachbody. And Tony could have approached his messaging and the words that he was using as, you know what, I've got these really great polyurethane DVDs. They're made from high whatever, and they're not going to crack on you. They don't skip. They're amazing. And I wouldn't have cared. What Tony knew about me was he understood my problem first. He said, look, you don't have a lot of time. You don't have a lot of space. And what you want, he dug into my aspirational identity. What you want is a beach body. Great. Now he positioned himself as the guy to say, great, here's P90X. Go and do it.
Yeah, for sure. No, you're exactly right. Yeah. Yeah. That's a great analogy. I'm gonna actually probably use that one going forwards.
Well, it speaks into the fact that we really need to simplify things for our customers. We are so deep in the trenches with what we know about our products and services, right? And so we believe that our customers live in that world. They don't. They're living in their own aspirational and heroic world. So, let's give you an example. If I am let's say I am a CIO or a CISO, whatever, and my job is to keep all of the infrastructure, the data of my organization safe. I'm not really waking up thinking, ooh, I need new cybersecurity software. What I'm thinking is, how do I keep all of this safe so my CEO sees me as his right hand man or woman, right? And so we then, a cybersecurity leading company, has to position their messaging to really hit home with what I want. Look, use our software because now you will protect everything. The C-suite will love you and you will be the hero of the day.
Yeah, well, that's exactly right. That's a perfect way to set up the hero there. Love it. Now, as you're doing all these, now as you're helping brands with content, things of that nature, what tools are you using out? Of course, there's the Claudes of the world, LLMs out there. How are you guys employing those across the board, and what does that look like?
Absolutely. I used to use When I first started in the whole world of AI, I really leaned into Jasper a lot.
Yeah, well, Jasper, yeah.
If you remember that this was a couple years back, it was really great. Then I transitioned over to ChatGPT. Now I'm a massive Claude fan. And I'd like to kind of speak into that for just a moment, if that's okay, Josh, because the pushback I get, especially from content creators, initially it was like, you're all going to lose your jobs. We're not going to need writers anymore. And we absolutely know that's not the case. I will absolutely leverage a tool like Claude, but Claude, still, as phenomenal a tool as it is, needs massive human brain power. And then, I can give it some thoughts. If you've got the right prompts, it's going to generate back some really phenomenal things. But then even still, I've got to go through and put the human element to it because AI, as phenomenal as it is, does not understand heartbreak, does not understand why I'd want a beach body to begin with, right? So that's probably the tool I use most. I'm also leveraging, obviously, video content. I think most companies today, if you're not leveraging some type of video, and we hear Gary Vee talk about this all the time, that's where you've got to be, because the way that it builds trust is really next level. You will speed up the conversion to people doing business with you if you can deliver great content and if you're unafraid to get on video. So I leverage CapCut a lot and obviously YouTube.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. No, those are all great tools. And I think there's a lot that goes into what you said about Claude, about them bringing the human aspect too. Like you're using that tool to get us 75% of the way there, right? Maybe 80% of the way there. And if you know what good writing is, you can really take it to 100%, right? I also think a lot of it goes with your experience. So I do worry about like people coming straight out of younger professionals that haven't had to write a lot, but then they have these tools here that are writing for them that their learning curve might be substantially different than somebody that had to write on their own for a decade, right? I'm not saying they can get there, but
Do you mind if I ask you, Josh, what tools are you leveraging in this space? Because you and I kind of live in the same world when it comes to
yeah, yeah.
marketing, all of that good stuff. What I'd love to learn from you. What are some tools that you maybe recommend that I start to look at, or are you also just leveraging Claude and it's kind of the
Yeah, a
kind of
little bit of some of the standard, but I use them for different purposes. Especially depends on what content I'm writing. I'll usually start get an outline or something, a first draft in GPT, and then take it to Claude, and then maybe even reference it Copilot or Gemini, just to make sure we're getting all different angles. I like to throw it all through Perplexity as well, just to make sure it's absolutely 100% accurate. In terms of if I'm making like any data claims, like if I'm referencing stuff, I know my references are strong. I actually have my background is marine biology, so I have a ton of scientific references and research in my history, so I know how to reference things, but I will still run through Perplexity just to make sure it's 100% accurate. So,
I
so
love that.
I'm using all the tools back and forth.
Well, and pardon to cut you off, I was going to ask you about Perplexity because I wasn't sure how it was different. Because obviously, I've liked Gemini, obviously, because of the deep
Yeah.
research. But am I hearing you say that Perplexity is a second level research tool?
In my mind, it is, yeah. So I'm
Okay.
not the 100% expert to speak on it, but it is a great tool to verify, or go out and do some research for you as well. So it is a good deep research tool. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'm going to
Yeah.
start looking into that.
No problem at all. Yeah. Those are the tools, yeah, I'm currently using. Jaspers. Remember when going to Inbound? I think HubSpot Inbound Conference in Boston. I think it was 4 or 5 years ago now, and Jasper was new, right? So like the company I was with at the time, we came back immediately got Jasper. And at the time, it was mind blowing, because you're doing all this amazing writing at the time. But then, quickly as fast as things change, we got GPT and the rest of them, though. But
Well, and so again, pardon to cut you off. HubSpot, too, about a year ago, decided to implement their own blog and content creation, which was another reason I was hearing some of my clients say, hey, we're not going to need you anymore because HubSpot's going to take care of it. And I think it definitely takes it about 80, even 90% of the way there. But it's you still need the human element.
agree, but you also, yeah, and you need the system thinking behind it too. Like, one piece of content, great. HubSpot got you 95% of the way there, for example, or whichever LLM we're talking about. But what are you going to do with that content? How are you going to create the other content from it? Where's your social media, your newsletter, everything else? Video content from that written content, right? And the system that it goes into it, I think, is huge. That AI and agentics, they are getting there, but still, it does take a human touch to be able to distribute it and amplify it. So
Absolutely. And I'd like for anyone listening when they think about AI, initially I'll be very transparent in that I had a little bit of resistance to it because the message we were receiving as content creators was it's going to take your job away. And here we are a couple years later and I'm starting and I saw this in real estate too. I saw this happen in real estate. It was maybe 2015 or so. This big company came around and said, oh, we're the new way to sell. They were using fancy tech where a homeowner could go on and really sell their home on their own. That model, sure, in a easy real estate market, that model went pretty well for maybe 4 or 5 years or so. And then eventually, yeah, the model just was not profitable. And here's what we learned people still need people. So if you are in content in any way, or if you're a leader leveraging it for content, that's great. Just understand we're always going to need the human element of it. And so don't be afraid to lean in. I don't believe anybody really is afraid. I think people are more just confused on what's the best way to leverage it. But ultimately, we'll still need humans.
for sure, there's always, definitely the human in the loop on everything. I agree with that too. But what now, as looking back over the course of these big shifts that you have made previously, right? If you could have done anything different, whether it's the corporate to realtor or realtor to marketing, what would you have done differently, if anything?
I tell myself that I would have prepared better financially because what happened, I had a 9 to 5 where I had a salary where I was getting paid every 2 weeks. I had benefits. And I was completely naive. Again, I put in my 2 weeks notice, showed up at my brokerage. Ta-da, I'm here. I had almost no financial reserves whatsoever. I just thought it's all going to magically work and I'm going to make all of these hundreds of thousands of dollars. And I'll tell you about probably 100% of real estate agents that get into real estate do so because they think it's easy and they're going to make a lot of money. So I tell myself that I would have given myself more of a financial savings. But at the same time, I tell myself I'm glad I didn't. And here's why. Because I am very much an introvert. And to get an introvert to go knock doors, I mean, anybody, even extroverts, who the heck wants to knock the doors
Me.
of strangers?
Yeah.
No, heart is
Yeah.
palpitating. Here I am. So I had to do it because I had to survive. I had no other paycheck coming my way. So I wouldn't change that because I wouldn't have done the things that I did. I wouldn't have accelerated my speed to closing the business I did if I had had a backup plan. What I might have done is just maybe given myself like a 6-month reserves, maybe set a plan, a financial plan better. And similarly, when I made the shift to marketing, the shift I would have made there was just to have been a little more clear about my offer up front. So with real estate, it was very easy what I was selling. I'm selling your house. In marketing, it was like, well, what am I selling? I'm selling words, I'm selling emails. So I would have gotten a lot clearer about what my 1 or 2 offerings were.
Yeah. I do love that. I love the hesitation to say it was great whenever you left corporate to realtor, but it's kind of like you burn your boats kind of moment, right? Like there's no going back. Let's just roll.
Oh, yeah.
I think that's what makes a great entrepreneur a great entrepreneur too, because like it's that desire, like maybe it's financial or it's family desire or something like that, but that forces you to do things that you normally would never do. And then once you do it, like say 10 to 15 times, it starts to become old hat and you get better at it, right? And then the next thing you come across, you're like, well, I can never do that. But then once you try it, you know, fear is really this type of fear is really just inexperience, right? So that's a big moment. That's pretty cool. I love that.
Well,
Love that
and
story.
to add to that too, I'd say there's your naivete or whatever that word is. The fact that you're so naive to it is almost in your benefit because I will tell you, I was willing to do things that seasoned realtors were not. I remember getting my LinkedIn profile all like, nice or whatever. And this seasoned agent telling me, why are you doing that? Nobody cares about LinkedIn. And I'm like, really? Do you know how much business I at the time had gotten from leveraging professional relationships where I showed up on LinkedIn in a professional business like a manner. So that naiveness, right, really just allows you to do things that sometimes when you've been in it for so long, you think this is the only way. Someone with a new set of eyes comes in and says, why? Maybe there is a different way. And that can really play to your advantage.
Amen. It can. I also think going back, you said this at the very beginning and you kind of re-echoed it there, but like your sphere of influence and actually utilizing that sphere of influence. I remember when I first started my business, the first one back in 2013, I had massive imposter syndrome. I didn't want to tell any of my friends or family what I was doing. So I was like not leveraging any of my people I knew. I was just trying to get cold, outreach to everybody. Right. Just because, you feel insecure when you're starting a new business, for example, and you didn't want to use that. But as you get older and get used to that and get over that fear, channeling your sphere of influence and networking is the most powerful and quickest way to really do anything these days.
I love that because they are the people who want to cheer you on. Now, in real estate, they didn't always do that, but you know what? I want to give credit where credit's due. And now, what I would have done slightly different, knowing what I know now, like you said, at least in marketing, 100%, I would have leveraged my relationships with the business owners that I did have a relationship with. And yes, there is imposter syndrome. Anytime you make a big shift, you're going to feel like a fake because, of course, you are. You don't have the 10,000 hours of reps. But here's
Mhm.
what people are really looking for. If you have proven yourself to be someone who is trustworthy and you have a great work ethic in other realms of business or even in a 9 to 5, that speaks a lot to your character. So if you just keep showing up and people see that you stay consistent with it, they'll start to trust you. And really just leveraging those relationships is something that I would highly not overlook because really people do business with the people they know, like, and trust.
For sure. Speaking of your business, what do you think is the secret sauce in terms of why people continually work with you, come back with you? And what is your differentiator right now?
I'd like to say that it's because I do what I say I will do. And it
Which
comes
is
back
kind of rare
to
these days, right?
You and I think that, oh, okay, that might sound really fluffy, right? Like, of course, we would do what we say we would do. I can't tell you the amount of businesses that don't respond, that make it really difficult to buy. Like, I'm literally trying to give you my money
Take
and
my money.
they're putting you through like 20 different like CAPTCHA verifies or whatever. So being someone of integrity, someone who delivers on the promise. And second, when people really see that you care, like you're not just, yes, of course, I got to make money and we all do and we got to make revenue. But when people can see that, look, I really care. And here's why I'm making this recommendation around your messaging or why I'm recommending we put these campaigns in place. But I also think the biggest thing is I'm able to directly show them how marketing ties back to revenue. And I think most marketers avoid that conversation. We don't want to be on the hook for money. Like we want to do all the things, but I think that's where the sales background in real estate really helped me. It helped me see that everything we do in marketing must tie back to two things: more customers and more revenue. So I think they trust that, they see that, and they go, okay, I see how you're helping me get more customers and make more money, Ali.
I love it. That's awesome. Yeah, that's hard. And sometimes it's very hard to do is tying those together. But if you have the process to tie those, that's amazing. So what are you working on right now that you're excited about?
What I'm working on right now that I'm super excited about is two things. The first is teaching people how to start their own podcast because I believe it's a great way to build brand
Yeah.
authority. People get to know you, you're in their ear, or you're on YouTube and they get to see your face. So, a podcast course accelerator type thing. And then number two is a profit first whiteboard cohort. Now, that's a lot of words, but basically, it's this whole system that I've chatted about. It's how do we start with revenue first and whiteboard it out so that all of your marketing activities tie back. And then we set the strategy for now that we know the revenue, now that we know the activities, now we're going to go create those deliverables. And this is a cohort where we really just do it for just a couple of weeks where I'm there with you, guiding you along the way. If anybody's interested in that, yeah, just head over to my site. I'd love to chat with you about it. But it's a really affordable way to get the most critical marketing activities that you need to get done. And it's, again, going to give you that clarity around, oh my gosh, this is the marketing that gives me more customers and more profits.
Yeah. And where can people find out more about you, get in contact with you? Rightbrandmarketing.com. Anywhere else?
Yep, that's perfect. Yeah, I'm also on Instagram, Right Brand Marketing, LinkedIn as well. And it is right, like a writer, WRITE, so rightbrandmarketing.com. But yeah, I'm low pressure. And I did this in my real estate sales background too. I was always very low pressure. Let's have a conversation. Let's find out if we're even the right fit to working together first. If I can even help you, I'm confident I can. But ultimately, just, yeah, let's chat or follow me. Let's connect. I'd love to learn more about you. And like you and I have talked about, just build a better relationship.
Totally. 100%. As we wrap this up, any last thing you want to say to the listeners out there? One last piece of parting advice, anything?
Absolutely. If you're in a place where you're not sure if your brand messaging is connecting right, or if you're kind of stuck and you're thinking, I'm not sure what marketing activities are making me money and bringing me more customers. First, I would say in regards to messaging, see if your brand message passes the grunt test. And this is a Donald Miller thing. Like if you shared like the hero section of your website, or if you answered the question, what do you do? Could a caveman, or even maybe in this case, a 10-year-old understand it pretty simply? Number one, run it by them. Number two, if you're not sure on the revenue and the marketing activities that are bringing you more customers and profits, I would say go back and look at the last maybe 2 to 3 years of your business and really conduct a minor audit on what deals you closed and where they came from. And that's going to give you so much clarity, because that taught me with real estate. My husband was the math guy, and that's where I had the big aha, because I was working on a team at the time, on a real estate team that was giving me all these cold leads. And my husband helped me see that 2/3 of my revenue was coming from my sphere of influence, from the people that already knew, liked, and trust me. And that I was spending 80% of my time chasing these
Yep.
cold people who didn't.
2080 rolling. Yeah.
Absolutely. So I'd say do those two things and you're going to walk away with a ton of clarity.
I love it. Those are two great pieces of advice, and I echo those as well. So, Ali, thank you for that, and thank you for being on the podcast today.
Absolutely, Josh. It was a privilege, and I love chatting with you today.
All right, guys. Well, that's a wrap. Thank you for listening. Marketing Reboot, Making Big Shifts. I'm your host, Josh Anderson. Please sure to like, subscribe, and share. We'll catch you on the next one.
Hey guys, thanks so much for listening to Making Big Shifts by Marketing Reboot. It would be a huge help to us if you subscribe to the channel and share this with somebody that you think needs it. Your support helps us continue to bring great guests on board and keep the conversation going. Have a great day.
Thank you for listening to Making Big Shifts. Like, share, and follow for more. Join us next time on Making Big Shifts, presented by Marketing Reboot,